You are here in Kigali at the Kusi Ideas Festival in your capacity as the African Union's High Representative for Infrastructure Development in Africa. What is your view about the future of Africa in the next 60 years? What does Africa look like for you?
Smithy, I think that this century is really going to be an African century. I'm very confident, seeing what development are taking place on the continent. But it will not just come by itself. It will take the efforts of the African people to make it happen. Africa, as you see, is the youngest continent. The population, on average, is below 35 years of age. Africa is also one of the richest continents in terms of natural resources. It has been a paradox that the richest is also the poorest in terms of living conditions of the people. But this has to do with the historical past. We want to focus on the future. And I see that the next 60 years actually are years they pose a challenge, but I also believe that if Africa gets its act together, which is what you're trying to do, Africa should be able to reclaim this century.
What, in your view, does Africa need to do to get its act together, as you say?
First, we need to take a critical look at where we're coming from and not be beholden by the past. Because for a long time, the leadership has been too much focused in condemning the past and using that as an excuse for not doing what is right for Africa. I think that is what we should forget about, because other countries also have their own dark pasts. Colonialism was not only in Africa. The United States was once upon a time a colony. India was a colony. And so was Singapore, Malaysia, even Korea, and all these countries were colonized. So we need to basically just focus on what do we need to do as a people. And also not be beholden to artificial boundaries which were created by colonialists in Berlin without Africa being represented. These physical boundaries basically are an impediment to our growth and development.
Let's narrow into Kenya in particular. What is it that the youth, because you made it clear that the youth or the majority of the population are below the age of 35, what do they need to do to secure Kenya's future in particular?
You see, the youth, as you know, is a very potent factor. Given or empowered, in other words, given the requisite education and skills, it can be a major factor for production. But if that is not done, then they become delinquents, drug addicts, criminals. So what needs to be done first is that the government needs to empower the youth with skills, the way China has done, or India and so on, and then use this youth now as a factor for production.
And is the Kenyan government empowering the youth as much as they should?
I think they're doing. I think there's effort is being made to empower the youth. There are several programs the government has initiated. Like for example, expanding investment in education and in tertiary level education to impart the skills of the youth. And secondly, to give youth the access to capital they would need to engage in enterprise development. And then the other one is to also open up space for the private sector. because there's been too much focus on the public sector. Employment in civil service, in the military, in the police, which are fairly limited opportunities. We need to create opportunities for the private sector to thrive, to grow. That is where the opportunity for massive employment lies. And if the youth have got the skills, they've got access to capital, the youth, African youth, Kenyan youth in particular, will be able to prosper.
But as you say that, Kenyan youth are constantly complaining of a lack of job opportunities. We have several people who are graduates who are being employed in sectors that really don't utilize their skills as much as they could. How do you justify that?
You see, there is need to do the matching of skills or training of our high institutions to the demands of the market. There is up to so far a mismatch, because you have got youth with paper qualifications running around looking for jobs. Then you have got businesses also looking for skills to employ, but what they are demanding, looking for, is not in the market. So there is a mismatch between our training priorities and what the market demands. That's where there is a problem. Okay. And that is what needs to be really addressed properly.
All right, let's move our focus now to the Building Bridges Initiative report that was handed over to the President and yourself very recently. Is the report intended to smoothen your way into the presidency?
You see, what me and the President discussed was, is there a problem in the country? I don't think that any sane Kenyan can say that there's no problem. All of us appreciate that there's fundamental problems in the way affairs of our country are being run. Is there a solution to this problem? My view is that yes, there's a solution. I was taught in school that if there is a problem, there's a solution to that problem. And this is what we want to address. That why are we where we are since independence? When did the rain begin to beat us? And how can we change this and bring the people together? Create one nation out of the nation state that we have had for all these years from independence. How can we bring up a people and create what you call the Kenyan personality, Kenyan person? That's why we're talking about ethos. Then how about the issues of disparities in terms of development? Regional disparities, gender, and so on. How can we deal with this issue called corruption so that we don't continue to lose so much money that is required for development of the country to the people who are supposed to be actually spearheading that same development? And then how do we deal with the insecurity in the country? How do we deal with the issues of I've talked of disparity, the issues of gender, for example, because you find that the Kenyan women still feel very much disabused and excluded from decision-making processes. How do we create one cohesive society in Kenya? Those are the critical issues that we ask ourselves. And then BBI is meant to address this. Why would we always have fights after elections? Why do we have tensions building up a year before elections and a year after the elections? So that we waste 2 years in a span of 5 years where there is no development. Most investors are scared away.
But that tension is being created at this point, as we stand in 2019, ahead of 2022, isn't it?
Yes, right now, of course, there's some kind of anxiety, I won't call it tension, about BBI, what is it that is contained. There are, of course, individuals who have got ambitions for 2022, but I think it's minor. And my view is that we should not be discouraged from addressing these issues because of interests of a few individuals.
Do you have interests in 2022 and ambitions?
I've never said, and I've said that what we're doing is not intended to propel myself or President Uhuru Kenyatta to power in 2022. We say that we want to bequeath a strong, united country for the future generation. So what we are doing right now is meant for posterity. It is not meant to propel the interests of Raila Odinga or Uhuru Kenyatta beyond 2022. So we want to see one country that is properly united. And we said, let us not talk about what is going to happen. That is just going to be an event. It will be come and go, but Kenya will stay. But why do we keep on wasting valuable resources year in, year out? Can we have an election whose outcome will be accepted by everybody, the winners and the losers, so that we have something that is sustainable and which will work for the entire nation of Kenya? I think it is possible. Me and President Uhuru Kenyatta are convinced that what we are doing will eventually usher in a strong, united Kenya, which the founding fathers of our nation had desired.
How would you describe your relationship with President Uhuru Kenyatta? Because over a year ago, there were frosty relations. How would you describe it now?
We had a very frank conversation before the handshake, and it was not easy, as the President mentioned during the launch of the BBI report. We had called each other names. We had fought very severe battles before. But as you know, we had also worked together before that time. Uhuru was my assistant prime minister. And we just decided to be frank to each other and take the journey down the memory lane and look at where is our country coming from the days of colonialism to the struggle for independence, to independence and then post-independence. When did the rain begin to beat us as a people? And how can we resolve this matter so that we ultimately create a firm foundation for a united, prosperous nation? So this is where we are. So it took, as I mentioned the other time, the first meeting, it lasted 13 hours. And then we adjourned. The second meeting lasted 6 hours. So it was a total of 19 hours of one-on-one, just the two of us, talking together, talking to each other, until we agreed that we now have the meeting of minds. We have something that we can actually face the people with, the country with. Then we put it on paper. And that is the basis of the handshake. So the handshake is not just mere love for each other. It is something that is meant to unite the entire nation of Kenya.
Is there love or friendship for each other, as you say?
We have, of course, no personal hatred against each other. As you know, that we go back a long time. Our families have been involved in the struggle for the liberation of the country, and we have personal family ties which go beyond just this engagement in political arena. We think that it is possible after that kind of struggle to get together and find a way of bringing the people together. And, you know, the entire of the continent is looking at Kenyan experience.
How would you then describe your relationship with Deputy President William Ruto?
Again, I have no personal issues with Deputy President William Ruto. As you know, Ruto was my minister. I'm appointed him Minister for Agriculture and then Minister for Higher Education. We worked together before, and whenever we have disagreed, it has been public. I've made it public that here we have disagreed on this issue, on this other issue. But there are no personal grudges as such. What I've said is that here you have gone wrong, here you're making a mistake, and I have been very frank and open about it. And that's how it should be.
There are no personal grudges. Are there professional grudges, if you may?
No, I mean, there cannot be professional grudges because his profession is different from mine. So we cannot disagree professionally, apart from the professional politics where we meet together. And in my view, in politics, you have to be frank and say your mind. So like the other time, they were accusing me of being responsible for the ICC, which was very, very far-fetched, because I could never have been the person to have taken William Ruto to ICC. As you know that we were together in 2007, 2008. So I would have been mad to be the person to go and take his name to the ICC. But of course, you understand, that was politics.
Right, and speaking of politics, Musalia Mudavadi, one of the NASA leaders, recently spoke about his memoirs, and he made it clear that there was no consultation amongst NASA leaders ahead of the swearing in of the people's president, that was you, Raila Odinga, and also there were no consultations amongst NASA leaders ahead of the handshake between you and President Uhuru Kenyatta. What do you have to say about what Musalia Mudavadi has said?
I really want to get involved with discussing Musalia Mudavadi's book at this stage. But I just want to say that he suffers from lapses of memory from the claims that he's making. If he asks even these other fellow principals in the NASA coalition, he will tell him that there was very extensive consultations about the swearing in. Even on the eve of the event itself, there was a very lengthy meeting at a venue somewhere in Karen, where everything else was agreed on. And it's not just only me who called him on that day. If you just want to jog his memory, there's so many other people who actually called him, and he told him frankly that he was not ready to come for reasons that he best knows or he mentioned to them. So I really don't want to get involved in details in those conversations. You've seen Madam Sadikosgei trying to correct him. I think he suffers from lapses of memory in what he has written. But that is, you can say, the gospel according to Saint Mudavadi. You know, there are several different gospels. St. Matthew's,
Right.
St. John. So another saint is going to write and put the record straight.
Okay. All right, let's just briefly go back to the Building Bridges initiative. What are some of the changes that may be made? And tell us about your view on the role of the Prime Minister, because that essentially would be a non-executive role, perhaps just a glorified member of the government.
Well, as you know, the BBI report is basically a recommendation by the task force on the basis of what they were told or what they had from the people during the consultations. It is not a final document, and that's why now it is out there for public debate. It is being translated into other vernacular languages so that people can read it and understand it properly. We expect that in the next 60 days, there's going to be a public discussion on it, and that there will be rapporteurs who are going to be taking the notes of what would have been suggested. I can see that a number of people would like to see a more executive prime minister. Like when I was a prime minister, my role was to supervise and coordinate functions of government, and it made the implementation of government projects much more effective, like what you have in Tanzania, you know, that the Prime Minister is also a member of the executive. What we're talking about here is a hybrid arrangement where you have got executive also in parliament, and therefore is able to coordinate functions of the government. At the same time, is also answerable to parliament and is there to answer questions from members of parliament. You have also cabinet ministers who will be able to answer questions in parliament, move motions or present bills to parliament for discussions.
And what would be the need for a referendum? Because there are many who argue that this BBI report does not require a referendum.
You see, ultimately, power under this constitution it rests in the people of Kenya. And the power that parliament enjoys is donated by the people. So what parliament can change, the people can change directly. In other words, there are certain provisions in the constitution which the constitution has said can be all changed through parliament. But basically because of the expenses involved and so on. But the people can take the power themselves and change everything. Parliament cannot change everything. There are several other clauses which Parliament cannot change, but the people can change. So here, for example, there are several proposals which are altering the structure of the Constitution. That when you are creating a position of a Prime Minister and giving Parliament the power to appoint that Prime Minister, you are changing the role of Parliament. When you are bringing the executive into Parliament, because before that we had a pure presidential system. Now we're coming up with a hybrid system where the executive is also going to be in Parliament. Ministers who are not members of Parliament are going to be made ex officio members. Right. That again is a very fundamental change to the provisions of the current constitution. And several others which require that. So that is necessary, and you can develop a consensus on this. The other one is you need people talk about expenses. Oh, it's going to be too expensive to do a referendum. I want Kenyans to understand that that can not necessarily be so. Currently, as we are talking, the cost of election in the US is US 40 cents per ballot. 40 cents per ballot. In Europe, it is between 40 to 60 cents per ballot. In India, it is just 50 cents per ballot. But then in Africa, in some places, it is 3. The highest, I think, is Nigeria, which is $5 per ballot.
So you think a referendum would be justified?
Our last election was costing us $20 per ballot. So it is just wastage. It is just time for people to eat. Okay, that's what we need to look at. If we come down and say not more than 50 cents per US per ballot, just take 50 cents times 19 million registered voters. It does not need to cost more than that. But particularly now that we are not even having several elections, it is just one. That last time you had 6 elections in one. Here you have only one, which is just a question of yes or no, not a referendum. It does not need to cost that much. Okay. I don't think it should cost more than 2 billion Kenyan shillings.
Okay. I just want to move on to the governorship of Nairobi County, capital city of Kenya. I want to get your views and response to the dramatic arrest and reaction of Governor Mike Sonko when he was arrested, and he will now face court.
Well, I really don't have full details of what actually transpired. And the matter is now sub judice because he's been charged in a court of law, and I don't want to say anything that will prejudice his trial. I think he's entitled to a fair trial, as any other Kenyan is entitled to. And my view is that we should all obey the law wherever we are. And let the institutions that are charged with the responsibility of serving or implementing the law be effective, be able to do their work. So it was humiliating to see the governor being arrested in such a fashion. I don't know how it happened, but the authorities have their reasons, have reasons which they will explain to the people of Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
We highly appreciate your warm response and relationship with the media, but what is your view on press freedom and the somewhat hostile response from the state towards the media in Kenya?
I think that everybody must take responsibility. Our media sometimes is also too hasty these days. We are in an era of this wild animal called social media, where wild allegations are made out of blues. You never even know, and nobody even checks, and things are there, and there's very little you can do about it. But the mainstream media have a responsibility. I, for example, complained that you find a long article headline written, nobody has cared to even ask you, and you find it there, and all that story is completely fabricated, which is basically character assassination, my view, and that is not really right. Like the other day, I see a crying headline that I'm involved in a car import scandal. I say, but why did people not even care to ask me? And then when you complain they go and write the apology in some small caption inside pages. See, I think sometimes the state is justified in complaining. So it is like, you blame Tom, but you must also blame Dick and this and that. I think that, but I also think sometimes the state also is overreacting in certain instances, because you also need to allow yourself to be criticized, for you to be able to correct yourself, and that is fine. But the media must also sometimes know that governance is not an easy thing. Sometimes there are certain measures which are being taken by the government which may not be very popular, but which are basically brought about by circumstances beyond control. And that must happen. We used to, when we were in government, take time to talk to the media, particularly when we were making some fundamental decisions. We would bring the editors together and explain to them why we are doing ABCD. And our relationship, I think, was not very bad with the media at that time. Okay. I think a little bit of PR needs to be done, but our media also need to be responsible.
Right. And just as we close, do you have aspirations to run for the presidency in 2022?
Smith, you have said it, I don't know how many times, that I have not said that I will run.
You haven't said, but do you have aspirations?
And I'm not going to say it, because you are want to make me say what I said. I don't want to say that I'm going to run. I've said we want to deal with the BBI and finish the BBI and be there.
All right. Do you have a candidate for 2022 as yet?
Yes, my party will definitely have a candidate.
Do you have a particular candidate in mind already?
Not really. No, I don't have a particular candidate in mind. We have a process through which we identify candidates. When the right time comes, we will use that process to identify a candidate. Right now, as you know, we are in the process of membership recruitment in the party, and we intend to hold party elections from grassroots sometime next year. After the BBI is over, we will start the process of elections at the grassroots, coming up to the sub-branch, branch, and ultimately to the National Delegates Convention, which will elect the new leadership of the party.
Do you still view ODM as the opposition party based on your new relationship with President Uhuru Kenyatta?
The ODM is not in government. And if you're not in government, where are you? You are in opposition.
So do you still consider yourself as the opposition leader?
Of course, but I'm not in parliament. I think our people have not appreciated the new constitutional order that we have now. You see, in parliament today, I mean, you have got three institutions. There's separation of powers. There's legislature, there's executive, and there's a judiciary. So parliament as a body oversights the executive. So that's why there is no government side and no opposition side. They call it majority and minority. But both of them, both majority and minority, have a responsibility to oversight the government. And this is what most people don't understand. So because they're saying you have no opposition in government. We have a complete new political dispensation, which most people have not appreciated, that the institution of Parliament has a responsibility to oversight the executive. Both Jubilee and ODM and Wiper and all these others members have a responsibility to oversight the government. Okay, so it is not just ODM which is supposed to oversight the government. But I'm not the leader of ODM in Parliament. We have a minority leader in National Assembly and a minority leader in the Senate. I am outside here, and you've heard me talk sometimes very critically of the government when things go wrong with me. But people just want me to continue the role of an opposition leader, but circumstances have also changed, because that was the time when before we had done the handshake. Now in the handshake, we are engaged in a process of trying to do a transformation jointly with President Kenyatta. So we formed that partnership to spearhead the transformation. But when things go wrong in the government, I will always talk about it.
Okay.
I will always talk about it.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Raila Odinga. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us on the TV.
Thank you, Smithy.